Hello and welcome to Pods Like Us. I'm Martin Quibell, known to my friends as Marv, and this time I'm speaking with Jamie from, is it Goblin Media? Is it Jamie?
Goblin Booth Production.
Goblin Booth Productions, that's the one. Get the names of the places correctly, Martin, even though you got it written in a piece of paper down there and you didn't even look.
It's all good.
Well, this time we're talking about the show Route 6.6. Hey, Jamie, thanks for speaking today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm wearing my Route 6.6 hat today.
That's cool. That's great. Can people get those online then?
They can at goblinboothproductions.com/store.
There we go. For a good price, I'm sure.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
I'm going to mix things up in the way that I do this. Instead of going to how I usually start, I'm going to go straight for the show and say, so Route 6.6, do you want to describe what it is to people so that they can know what they're going into in this audio drama, but then also explain it to them first, and then I'll ask the question.
Okay, yeah. So Route 6.6 is, the way I usually describe it is, it's a workplace comedy set in an alien truck stop. And that's the pitch.
Cool. So sometimes it's almost like a variation of the Pulp Fiction section where you've got the couple in the diner and everything's going off in the diner that keeps happening in Pulp Fiction. Sometimes
a little bit of that,
yeah. At the Crater Cafe.
Yes.
You've got a story you've got a couple of stories that develop from the beginning of the first season to the end, because the first season's over, isn't it? And now you're in a bit in between the first and you're coming back for the second. So in season 1, you've got these little storylines that have continued, that come, and there's an arc to them.
Yes.
So essentially you've got one arc that starts with episode 1 and carries right the way to the end. And then you've got the Molly and the Polly thing, with where Molly and Polly are joined or conjoined, and then they separate towards the end. Sorry, spoiler. Oh, sorry. Marv's done it. And then you've got these other bits as well, like the growth of Dave, human Dave, and these aspects as well. So were those story arcs all planned before you sat down to actually do the writing of it?
So they actually weren't. So the process that I went through to pitch and create this show was, I just started with the base idea of outer space truck stop. Like, the title was one of the first things I came up with. It's a play on US Route 66.
Yeah,
classic
really
mid-century Americana. Yeah. And I was like, okay, here's the setting. What do the characters look like? And then I just wrote episode 1 straight through as like a pilot project.
Yeah.
So Polly was just Polly with 2 heads at that time. Gil did not have a name. He was just unnamed trucker for most of that first episode, the first draft of it at least. I didn't know why he crash landed yet. And I don't think I had even planned on introducing Human Dave at that point.
Yeah.
Really, this was just an internal pitch for the rest of the Goblin Booth team to be like, hey, do we like this? Should I keep going? And the rest of the team said, yeah. So the rest of my process was then just letting these characters explore the world and flying by the seat of my pants a little bit, seeing where everything should go. The guiding light, though, was the mystery of why Gil's truck crashed. And that's like the one overarching, start of the season to end of season story.
Yeah.
And everything else hangs off key points in that. And so when I got to the end of episode 8/9, I just went back and smoothed everything out to make sure it made sense.
So was that a case then of you actually finished the whole thing and then put it out afterwards? So you finished all of the episodes and then cleaned it all up so that it all cohesively worked and then you put it out. Did you put it out as a complete, or did you put it out in parts?
So episodes 1 through 8 were completely written script wise before we ever started recording, because I wanted to make sure that I had all of that nailed down. The bonus episode 8.5 with all the news broadcasts, I actually wrote after we were finished recording the first 8 episodes, because I just wanted to put a button on everything and set up season 2. And then the second part of your question was how I put it out.
Yep,
Yeah.
how you put it out, yeah.
The entire season was written. By recording, I wanted to try to build up a backlog as much as possible, because we've had experience as a team with some of our other shows of recording, editing, putting out just week, and that's a very difficult schedule to sustain. Yeah. So I built up about a month's worth of backlog of raw recordings prior to issuing the first episode, but we still ran into some issues just with kind of the way things are going in the US right now. A lot of the team members had other things that they had to attend to personally and professionally that kind of interrupted our workflow. So there was a gap of 3 weeks before the last couple of episodes came out.
Yeah. Hence because you put an emergency episode out, didn't you, to tell people, oh, hey, it's Jamie here, just to let you know the episode is on its way, but because of blah, 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 and you let people know.
Yeah, check out our other shows, et cetera, et cetera. Fortunately, we do have a good back catalog of 3 other shows for people to listen to. But yeah, so tried to plan ahead and get ahead of anything like that. But, best laid plans and everything like that. Weird situations can still come up even with planning.
That's true. And trust me, I'm going straight to one of those shows very soon. Another one of those. So, we've got that. We've got what was the story arc planned. And then there's the writing and the honing of the script. What did that take then? So did you have too many ideas in essence, and then you had to cut them down? And what made you decide on the final, what was there and what you possibly pulled out?
Yes, that's a really good question. So this is the first big writing project I've put out in front of an audience in a serious way, but I've been writing as a hobby for a long time. And my usual process is I'll come up with the base pitch. Like for this one, it was truck stopping in space. Yeah. For other things, it's been more fantasy or whatever else have you. Then I'll introduce the base core cast of characters. In this instance, for Route 6.6, it started with just Matt, Ro, and Polly.
Yeah.
And then I just kind of let them run around in my head and explore this space that I've created. And wherever they run to is where the story goes.
How did you then choose the people for the voices for those characters?
Actually, a really fun process. So for Ro, I always had that character in mind for myself because he's just this really exasperated former science grad and things like that. And that kind of relates to my personal experience of life. So just having that sort of snarky mechanic archetype was something I knew I would have a lot of fun with. For Polly, she's actually voiced by 2 actresses. So we have Jessica, who also runs our sister show, The Harrowing of Minerva Damson. And we have Renee Andrews, who has also been a voice on that show. On that show, we have a character called the Madigo, which is this supernatural spirit that has a lay effect of 4 different voices. And the interesting thing about that was that Jessica and Renee record that simultaneously by speaking in unison live. So that is not a post-production overlay. They actually just sync up in person. And I knew I wanted to take advantage of the fact that they could do that. So I was like, okay, you guys are playing a 2-headed waitress. And when we started doing table reads for the first couple of episodes, it was incredible to see how quickly they fell into lockstep with each other. They both picked up on really similar tones and affectations for the character of Polly and later Molly. So I knew that had to be that. Nobody else could have pulled it off in the same way. And then for the character of Gil, I basically wrote that character for Mitch, with his personal affectations and vocal tics in mind. Human Dave was more interesting. We actually went through a couple of actors that we pitched it to, but the person we ended up casting in the role, Henri, was a friend we actually made during the course of planning out the season. And we'd been hanging out with him more and more frequently. And just something tickled the back of my mind that he would be a good fit because of his vocal register and the certain kind of like raspiness he had to it. And he had never done any voice acting prior to this, actually. But we had him do a demo reel, and that was Dave. He just emerged from the recording. So that was most of the main cast taken care of. Matt is obviously a text-to-speech program. That was actually planned from the start. I wanted a robot-generated voice for that.
Okay.
And then as far as all the side characters, that was a fun process because it was a combination of us just playing around in table reads, working with each other, bouncing off different sounds of what these people might sound like and sort of their vocal intonations. And for the character of Henny Glopkins specifically, I actually tried out for that one first, but it ended up being Renee that pitched the best voice for it. So we ended up running with her takes instead. So it was very much a collaborative process of discovering a lot of these side characters on the way.
I did a grab, one of the sequences, a small grab of one of the episodes that just touched me. There's humour to it, but there's also heart to it, which is just the bit where there's the Matt has got food or something, and one of them said, "Oh, Matt's got." I can't remember what it was now. Was it donuts or something?
Oh, the bagel?
That's it. Got bagels, and he said, "Oh, I've got one for the dog as well." And he was like,
Yeah.
He's got one for the dog, and because he'd worked out the dog's sort of dietary needs, and then the dog woofed, and then Matt goes, "Oh, good girl," like that. And I just found that so heartwarming as well as humorous at the same time. It just, yeah. So it works on that level.
Yeah, and actually, so the interesting thing is for Matt's text-to-speech, that was one of the very few in-post voices. But what we did to be able to keep that same sort of effect of playing off of each other in the same room is that usually Cian, but people took turns reading for Matt. So that way we could keep up with the various timings. And I actually took the later computer-generated voice and time matched it to that delivery to make it feel, ironically, a little more organic as opposed to fully synthetic.
Wow, that's cool. It's almost, I get actors in films where they are, they're all tagged or whatever on it, and then
yeah, the mocap.
Yeah,
it's like a vocal motion capture.
It's like a vocal mocap,
Yeah, so it ended up being really fun to produce him as a character because of that. And there's actually because that's the way we did it, I put in a little Easter egg in episode 2 where he's responding very negatively with a warning signal when they're all talking in the diner after close. That alarm sound is actually the sound of our actress Cian making beeping sounds that I heavily vocoded. So that's her real voice coming through briefly.
That's so cool. So the direction and the recording it and the editing. How do you record it? What do you use to record it with? And then the editing it together as well.
So recording, I can't speak a lot to because Jessica's the one that takes care of a lot of the more technical aspects of our recording. She is actually our pioneer for Goblin Booth Productions because the heroine of Minerva Damson was our first fully voiced podcast of any kind. So she's the one that has all the sort of hardware things sorted out. So if we speak to you in future with her on the line, she'll be able to speak more intelligently to that. I'll probably just get the details wrong. But with the editing, that is something that I took care of. And it was just taking it into Audacity. And our recording process, we're all on different mics, but it compresses it to a single audio track. And so it was a matter of just selecting favorite takes and then layering in the sound effects. The trickiest part for me personally was giving a sense of physicality to everything. because we have that like nice dynamic of us all being in the same room, and that helps with the emotional beats and everything. It helps the jokes land. But we don't have the timing of walking to different rooms and things like that. So that was just a matter of trying to appropriately guess out the gaps and match it to the various walk cycles and everything. And for Matt's character specifically, I actually custom created the sound of his walk cycle by layering several different sound effects together to get that sort of very clunky piston sound that he makes whenever he walks.
Cool. That goes to something I've got at the next bit. Yeah, where I said about them, I've got about the music and the sound effects. I mean, they're so good. I mean, how did you get those sound effects? Have you self-created those, or have you got them from somewhere else?
It's a mix and match. A lot of the sound effects were pulled from things that were open licensed on freesound.org because I think it's run by a university in Spain, but they do hosting for a lot of different sound effects, and you can filter their library for different license uses. So I used all the open source licensed sound effects. There are a small handful of ones that we produced in-house. A lot of Daisy the dog's barking is canned sound effects from the library, but a handful of them are actually my dog barking in the background and interrupting recordings. So that's a little bit of mix and match. And also the popping sound effect that the interference device makes at the end of episode 1 as it comes out of the portal gate, that was actually one of us making that sound in the recording studio. So a lot of it was library based with a handful of organically emerging sound effects.
What's better, Sean, than trying to create your own Foley work?
And that's something that we definitely want to explore more in future seasons, because that's something that we all enjoy playing with as a team.
People, if you haven't thought about doing it before, have a try at it. Try to make your own sound effects. It's just so much fun.
Oh, yes.
Absolutely. So, music and sound effects. Post-production then, when you've got it all together, what does post-production consist of? Like the show notes function of it?
Yeah, so the show notes I just basically came up with on the fly as we were getting ready to produce everything. I came up with some copy text and ran it by the other team members to make sure it sounded punchy and interesting. Promotion is still something that we're figuring out. We're a pretty young team still. We've only been official for a little over 2 years. We have a presence on Instagram with all of our various shows, as well as a core at Goblin Booth Productions account that we push out a lot of our announcements to. We recently also switched over to using Blue Sky, but getting the word out, still something that we're figuring out. For the harrowing and for Medium Morsels and This Book Sucks, we've done events where we go and pitch stickers and other cheap merch to various events. We haven't had a chance to do that with Route 6.6 yet, but that's coming soon.
Yeah, I mean, Route 6.6, I started listening to it and I could hear sort of like, this isn't meant near the way, but it's meant to sort of like a good thing, is that I think people who say, for instance, Megastar 7, they will love this show. I think Desert Skies, people who listen to that will love it as well.
Yes.
So you got the sci-fi element of Megastar 7 along with the humor. They match each other. And you could actually imagine them being in the same universe as each other with that.
So I haven't started listening to those yet, but they are on my to-be-listened list. Funnily enough, I started listening to Midnight Burger after we finished Route 6.6, but I found them and I was like, oh, somebody else has already been doing this sci-fi diner thing. It's really interesting to see it be accomplished in a radically different way, but it's still really cool to hear.
Yeah, and Desert Skies, that is a diner that's on another level. It's like between life and the eventual death, or basically it's like this diner that you stop at to be basically told where you're going, where your next stage is or whatever. And
okay, yeah. That pitch just sold me the rest of the way.
But so yeah, another plane of existence, essentially. But yeah, so I would say to people who like those shows, go to this. And yeah, Midnight is that's what it's called, is it?
Yeah, Midnight Burger. The
It's on my
dimension
list.
hopping
I know what
diner.
it's called.
Yeah.
And then you've got the great, very colourful logo.
Yes. So that was something that me and Mitch worked together on. So Mitch is not only the voice of Gil and several other characters in the season, he's also our on-team graphic designer, and he is truly a godsend. He is the one that makes us look like professionals. So I came up with a preliminary sketch of this road sign displaying the text of the show, and we workshopped through all kinds of different shapes, pulling a lot from like different mid-century designs. Again, Route 66 hotels and inns and casinos have those like very bold shapes, bright colors. So we knew we wanted to pull that in. And that's how we ended up with kind of the boomerang shapes and the angles and the bright colors the way we did. And as you can see, we also included the crashing space truck as a critical element of the logo as well. So it gives a little bit of a hint as to what you can expect just from that thumbnail.
What was the inspiration then for this? So I mean, you've already done before this. You've done 2 shows, was it? And then there's 4 in total so far, I think. Through
Yeah, that's right.
So, what was the inspiration for going all sci-fi and doing this specific story?
So for me, this was a passion project, truly. I have always been really preoccupied with mid-20th century schlocky sci-fi movies. So them with the giant ants, The Blob, Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, that really pulpy mid-century science fiction. That's always been near and dear to my heart. And the other side of that, fiction-wise, is working class and like normal people encountering completely abnormal circumstances. So my touch points there are the film Cowboys and Aliens was pretty influential for this. And also Tucker and Dale versus Evil, which takes the classic horror pitch of scary hillbillies and tells it from, what do the hillbillies have going on? Are they actually scary? Yeah. So it's those influences and a lot of kind of personal life influences for me I packed into this as a lot of my inspirations. So the alien grad student that comes around in episodes 3 and 4, based in no small part to my own experience as like a desperate grad student scrambling to figure out a research project. But also, like, I come from a coal mining family in Appalachia and have had a lot of truckers in my family. So that sort of trucker culture has been part of my upbringing. And I grew up in the American Southwest. So I've driven through these drying up small towns that are past their glory days that used to be tourist traps and things like that. So a lot of it is pulling from things that are very personal to me and trying to show my love to them, basically.
Absolutely. And something that's really interesting as well is the fact that science fiction as a whole is full of so many tropes.
Yes.
We can just name so many of them. But somehow or another, you still manage to find a way to surprise with the script and with things that go on, despite that possibility of there being tropes. Were you aware of these tropes and trying to purposely avoid them in some cases, but in other cases, almost make fun of those tropes, such as Dave is the alien? That is a trope that someone will come across an alien. Oh, it's an alien. Oh, what do we do? But it's the other way around in this case. It's turned on its head. We're the alien, they are not.
Yeah. So I would say a lot of that is very intentional on my part. My sweet spot is loving parody because I'm not making fun of these tropes to be mean to the things that came before. Like they're popular for a reason. They become tropes because people like them. But I like to look at them sideways. And specifically for Dave, I did want to have it be the flip side of so many sci-fi properties take place in this vast universe, but most of the viewpoint characters are humans, and that doesn't really sit right with me. Like, you have presumably millions of aliens hanging out, even though it takes place in these vast universes with presumably hundreds and thousands of species. Most of the viewpoint characters are still human, and that's a bummer because there's all sorts of interesting things that you can explore with alien characters. And in a lot of this, if it's visual media, there's a really good reason that it's still mostly humans, because special effects are expensive. But since we're in an audio-only medium, we can do whatever we like. So I just took that as a chance to run wild. That's how Polly and Molly's story emerged, because I was like, okay, she started out as she's a two-headed waitress. Is her whole species just two-headed people? And that sort of developed into, I'm a microbiologist by training. Maybe she's an amoeba. Maybe she's going to divide. And what sort of consequences does that have for like how that species thinks about family and childbirth and growing up? Because it's going to be completely different from how we do it. So that, I'd say that probably is what motivated a lot of how I approached tropes. Is I wanted to have these points of reference, like you have your insectoid aliens and your robots and whatever have you. But at the end of the day, what's driving them is the individual characters' personalities, not just a broad archetype.
It's interesting that you said that about the fact that because it's audio, you've got all this wealth of, you can do almost anything. It's the audio world is your oyster, in essence, or amoeba. I'm saying it's interesting that because I know that when I was talking with Ace and Champ, who Stellar Future Radio, they were both saying a similar thing where, because it isn't an audio format, they said that no matter what they come up with, no matter how nonsensical or crazy, they can get away with it because it's almost like you can actually take yourself from the world and go into that world, even though, and lose yourself to it, essentially, just to this crazy otherworldliness.
Yes, absolutely.
What would, going from the show for a short while then, so what would you say were your three sci-fi choices, things that you love the most?
In terms of how they directly impact Route 6.6, I would say Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy as a series.
Yep.
Hugely influential.
That's where the Marv comes from.
Yes. So there's, the depressed robot, the single human trying to figure things out in the universe. Just the general feeling of there's a lot of humor, but Adams was always very thoughtful about his humor and trying to say things with his humor. On a similar note, Futurama, both of those have in common, like they can be really funny, but they can also be serious, scary, heartbreaking, depending on what the subject matter is that they're taking on. So
Dave is Fry.
How's that?
Human Dave is Fry.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, he's that fish out of water character trying to figure things out. The thing that I wanted to do specifically with Dave, though, is usually when you have a one human character or one normal character, he's the viewpoint and your way into the universe. Dave is a viewpoint character, but he's not the main viewpoint character. It's all these other aliens that are human in their own ways, encountering this human and discovering him and how he works, because mammals are kind of foreign territory for them. And then the third one, I would say just collectively, most sci-fi put out between 1940 and 1960, just that entire collective era of rubber suit aliens. But specifically, I would say Forbidden Planet, because you go back and you watch it now, and it doesn't really match with a lot of our modern sensibilities very well for a variety of reasons. But it's such a hugely foundational text for modern sci-fi, and it's so firmly in that mid-century look of everything being very aerodynamic and geometric and also having that optimism that was inherent to that era of sci-fi. A lot of recent sci-fi, for good reason, I think, is dystopian because we are worried about the future, and I think that's well founded. But we need space for optimism. It gives us a chance to breathe. So there are things in the Route 6.6 universe that are dystopian, large corporations interfering and causing problems. But at the end of the day, the power of community building is what wins the day. And I definitely wanted to bring that optimistic feeling from that era of sci-fi back into my own work.
And at the same time, you've got to possibly the cantina from Star Wars in there as well.
There is that feeling, yeah. The wretched hive of scum and villainy.
So when you're, that was a nice takeout in a way, but yeah. But we'll stick on the sci-fi thing. So that's what you based, what you'd say directly fits with the show in a way. But what would be your own personal, if you were sitting down and you had a couple of days off or something, you know what, I want to watch something specific, sci-fi wise, or any sort of anything. What would it be that you would sit down to that's your comfort food?
So weirdly, a lot of my comfort food is horror, which might be a little surprising given that the show is pretty lighthearted and goofy. But one of my favorite movies that's come out recently is Underwater with Kristen Stewart, basically Alien, but make it maritime. That's excellent fun, really tight storytelling, great to put on in the background. That was a great time. A recent discovery me and my wife found on Tubi is Crawl.
Yes.
And I'm so sad I didn't discover that earlier in life. But again, it's that genre mash that I enjoy so much. It's here's this high fantasy environment. What happens if aliens invade?
Yeah, but then in that you throw in a bit of sword and sorcery as well.
Oh,
with
yes.
the whole aesthetic of it thrown in there for good measure.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And it's schlocky, but it's a lot of fun. And that kind of is definitely sort of a running theme for the things that I tend to enjoy.
Underwater with Kristen Stewart, in a way, that's sort of, I mean, you're probably too young to know this, but when The Abyss came out, the Dave Cameron film, I love the film, Dave. But when that first came out, I was expecting it to almost be Alien underwater. I mean, you've got Michael Biehn there for crying out loud in the cast, and you think, oh, he's just going to play the same character that he played in Alien. It wasn't. It was something completely different.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what I expected that to be. I expected The Abyss, being James Cameron, to be, like you said, Aliens underwater, which is Underwater with Kristen Stewart.
I actually really did love The Abyss. Again, a surprisingly optimistic film, I would say. And then probably another, I mean, I have so many comfort watches, but Independence Day. But yeah, so that's probably, I wouldn't say top three, but top three at top of mind.
I love Randy Quaid's character in that.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I think he came through a little bit in Gil in Route 6.6. Like it's got a little bit of that manic, reckless energy that came through.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's your advice then, now that you're writing yourself? What advice would you give to people wanting to actually start themselves as writers?
Gosh, I've actually been trying to think about this. There's a lot of writing advice flying around, but the classic refrain you hear all the time is write what you know. And in some ways that's true, but I think more importantly, it's write what you love. The reason that I finished Route 6.6 and felt confident about pushing it out to the world is that it did combine so many things that were really dear to me and that I was excited about. And so I would say if you want to get into writing, like really try to find the thing in your project that makes you feel really passionate about it. So for me, in Route 6.6, like we've mentioned, it's those working class stories encountering incredible odds. It's mid-century optimism. It's humor. It's pathos. It's personal family stories that I've put into it. Make it personal, take it personally, be passionate about it.
Really, I mean, from my own point of view, that's the same advice that I would give for this next one, which is podcast advice. If you're going to go into podcasting, make it something that you love or something that you're passionate about.
Yeah.
What would that be your advice for podcasters?
Absolutely, but more specifically for the podcasting end of things. So for me, the writing process was largely a solo endeavor. I touched base with the rest of the team, and they did pitch really good ideas for the characters that they were going to be voicing, and I incorporated that into the writing. But it was still like largely a solo venture. For me, the podcasting end of it really lived and died by having a good team. And we've tried to assemble different creative collectives before, but Goblin Booth is like the distillation of many efforts, and it thrives because the whole team is excited to be there and has unique talents that combine really well with each other. Things like Jess and Renee giving character notes and reading notes during recording so we can try different intonations and emotional beat. Things like Mitch's visual talents and things like that. Just everything that everybody brings to the table. It wouldn't be what it is without each of their individual contributions. So for me, it's find people that you love working with and that can get on the same page with you.
So what do you like to listen to yourself podcast-wise?
So I actually made a list. So Midnight Burger has definitely become top of list for me because it is a fellow weird diner setting. A Voice from Darkness is one that I dearly enjoy. It's kind of like take Welcome to Night Vale, but make it an advice show. That's basically the pitch for that one. Alice Isn't Dead was excellent and also trucking themed. Old Gods of Appalachia, particularly since I'm from the region. And also Cam Collins, one of the writers for Old Gods, was one of the earliest supporters for the harrowing of Minerva Damson. So there's a bit of a personal connection to that one. And then Magnus Archives, just because it's a titan in the space. They pulled off some incredible things, particularly in the face of COVID for their last season. And I haven't caught up with Magnus Protocol yet, but it's on the list.
All right. Thank you for speaking with me today, Jamie. And I've talked through all the technical issues.
That's all right. It's been a pleasure.
It's the way that it goes sometimes. So
It really is.
Where can people find you and get hold of you, Jamie?
So I'm on Instagram at Route 6.6 pod. We also have a Patreon at patreon.com/Route 6.6. But you can find our other shows at goblinboothproductions.com, as well as merch, some other upcoming project announcements and team bio sketches. And we're also on Blue Sky, goblinbooth.bluesky.social.
Thank you for speaking with me today. You can find Pods Like Us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, X, and Blue Sky. And we have our email is podslikeus@gmail.com. And we are also on Patreon if you want to go to patreon.com/podlikeus. Anyway, thank you everyone for listening, and hope you're listening again to another episode of Pods Like Us.